the best night's sleep in the whole wide world is MyPillow.com.
Brand new bombshell text messages rocking the FBI, revealing additional evidence of anti-Trump bias and raising new questions about President Obama's personal involvement in the Hillary Clinton email investigation. All of this as we await a decision from President Trump on the Democratic FISA memo. A lot happening at the top of the 10 o'clock hour Eastern time. Good morning to you, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith.
Morning, Sandra. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning, everybody. Thousands of newly released text messages between two FBI agents, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, showing evidence of political bias and conflicts of interest within the Bureau. Now, their opposition to Donald Trump coming to a head on Election Day. Page wrote this: "I bought all the president's men, figure I need to brush up on Watergate." And that's just the beginning. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge reading a lot as she does there in Washington, D.C. And good morning, Catherine. What do we have?
Well, thank you, Bill. These texts about emails between President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are significant. In July of 2016, you'll remember that statement recommending against criminal charges in the Clinton email investigation. Then FBI Director Comey's early draft had a mention of the emails and the likelihood they had been compromised by hackers. This was then watered down by FBI agent Strzok as well as other senior officials just to a minimal reference and then removed altogether. A week before Comey's July statement on June 30th, 2016, Strzok and Page talk about the edits, and the text suggests the edits were done with purpose and to downplay the situation. Quote, "Hope so, just left Bill." This is reference to Strzok's boss, Bill Priestap. He changed president to another senior government official. After the election, both Page and Strzok say they are depressed. And in mid-November, Page writes, "I bought all the president's men, figure I need to brush up on Watergate." Then the next day, Page tells Strzok, "God, being here makes me angry. Lots of highfalutin national security talk. Meanwhile, we have our task ahead of us." Set investigators say this needs more explanation. And they want to understand whether the our task reference is also connected to this insurance policy discussion that they had in Deputy Director McCabe's office just before the election.
So also now, what are you learning about the Clinton connection with the dossier that apparently something ran through the Justice Department? What's the connection there?
Okay, so this newly declassified criminal referral released by Senators Grassley and Graham shows the FBI relied heavily on the Trump dossier to secure these surveillance warrants, and that Clinton associates were feeding information to the former British spy Christopher Steele as he compiled the dossier. And it reads in part, the report was information that came from a foreign subsource who was in touch with Redacted, a contact of Redacted, a friend of the Clintons, who passed it to Redacted. There are indications that the blacked out sections refer to a longtime Clinton ally and friend, Sidney Blumenthal, who you'll remember provided intelligence reports to then Secretary of State Clinton through her unsecured personal server used exclusively for government business. Last night on the story, Congressman Gowdy strongly hinted Blumenthal is a possibility.
When you hear who the source or one of the sources of that information is, you're going to think, oh my gosh, I've heard that name somewhere before. Where could it possibly have been? And
the foreign source?
The domestic source. And I'm trying to think how Secretary Clinton defined him. I think she said he was an old friend.
So when you kind of lay it out for context, what you see is almost like this echo chamber effect. You have the former British spy receiving information from a Clinton associate. You have the fact that his research is being funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. And then you have him briefing reporters on his findings. And the result of one of those briefings, the Yahoo article, makes it into the surveillance application by the FBI along with the dossier. So it's not only circular reporting, but it almost has this kind of echo chamber effect, Bill.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Catherine, thank you. Catherine Herridge there in Washington. Sandra's got more on this.
Thanks, Bill. James Freeman is assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal editorial page and a Fox News contributor. All right, let's start with these texts because these are some bombshells, and everybody's left wondering this morning, what was President Obama's personal involvement in the Hillary Clinton email investigation? When you look at this text, which this was happening because one FBI agent said he needed to brief Jim Comey, then the FBI director, this exchange. POTUS wants to know everything we're doing. That was Lisa Page, the FBI lawyer, to someone she was having a relationship with, Peter Strzok, who was working on the investigation.
Yeah, so
it applies to both the Russia investigation and the Clinton email investigation, is we've wondered all along, wow, these seem like pretty high-level decisions, whether it's to spy on your political opponents or for Jim Comey, the FBI director, to break all protocols, essentially declare her innocent without ever leaving it to the Justice Department, which normally makes charging decisions. You know, how high did this go? And so now to see in this email from Page to Strzok that she needs to brief Comey because the president wants to know everything, that would suggest if he didn't know everything, he knew a lot, unless they were avoiding briefing him somehow.
So if that's the case, and it is as it appears when we read this, as they are released in this Senate report, what happens then? I mean, is another special counsel needed? Where does this go?
Well, I think there's a lot more left to learn. Of course, these texts are coming from Ron Johnson's Homeland Security Committee. His committee was not told about them, any of them, by the federal government. They learned in news accounts. Now they've been kind of pulling them out, learning more from the IG investigation, the Inspector General. So I think we're going to see more of that information, but it does fill out the picture, and it naturally leads to where this really hasn't gone to this point. There hasn't been a whole lot of discussion about whether the president signed off on whether it was the Russia collusion stuff or the Clinton email thing. But you go back to that Comey decision where he basically throws out all the processes of the FBI, and at the time condemned by former officials from both Democratic and Republican administrations, saying, you know, this is not the job of the FBI director to make these decisions. And you wonder, how would he have the confidence to do that? And this raises the question of maybe he wasn't a loose cannon. Maybe this was coming from higher up.
And we'll see what more we learn on that. Meanwhile, we're awaiting the possible release by the president, who has the ability to make that Democratic memo public or not. Trey Gowding suggesting that the president may be in some sort of trap here if he redacts too much. So where does this leave us? Will we see this memo? Will the president release this?
I would think he would. I hope he does. Now, there is an issue, I think, particularly some of the footnotes. Maybe there's an argument for redaction. You certainly don't want, as they always say, sources and methods to be betrayed. But I think it would be very helpful for our public to get this full story out. And this may be a slanted Democratic view of things. I think you can assume it's going to have a very different take than the Republican one. But wouldn't it be better to get the facts out and debate them instead of having Adam Schiff, for example, ranking Democrat on House Intelligence, constantly making allegations and saying he's seen evidence, but we can't see it. This is much healthier.
In what form we will see that memo, right? Because back to John Kelly's signaling that there could be redactions of the documents. He says this is not as clean a memo as the first one. So you wonder what it'll look like ultimately if it is released.
That's right. I think it would be nice, though, if this was part of the discussion, and then let's learn more. I think a lot of Americans would also like to hear from the FISA judge. I know this is not normal protocol. It is a secret court, but I think it's an important question for our democracy, our republic. How did this happen that the government came to spy on the opposition party? And I'd like to know, was that, as I assume, was that judge very angry not to be told about some of the background? Or is it this easy to issue a warrant to spy on the opposition?
Very serious questions.
For sure.
And that story continues to develop. James Freeman, always good to have you.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being here this morning.
8 minutes past, Fox News Alert.